As we continue with the Deep Purple family tree, we get to an album called Restless Heart. It's a Whitesnake album that wasn't supposed to be one. So that's what I'll talk about today. It also has a former Whitesnake guitarist coming back. I'll get to that in a minute. I covered this in a previous video, but here's a quick recap. After completing the Liquor and Polka World Tour in September 1990, David Coverdale decided to put Whitesnake on hold, wanting to take a break from the music industry. In 1993, he released an album with Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page. However, the collaboration came to an abrupt end in December 1993 after only a few live shows. Coverdale later contacted Whitesnake guitarist Adrian Vandenberg about resuming their musical partnership. Coverdale and Vandenberg tried to write an album before the Jimmy Page album, but it never went anywhere. But early in 1994, Coverdale was approached with the opportunity of performing in St. Petersburg. He accepted and soon began planning a full European tour with a session band backing him. However, EMI and Geffen Records released Whitesnake's Greatest Hits. This Greatest Hits album came out in July 1994, and then they asked him to tour as Whitesnake instead. At first he was reluctant, but he eventually agreed, having Adrian Vandenberg join him. After the tour ended later that year, Whitesnake were dropped by Geffen Records, leaving the band without a North American record deal. So Coverdale decided to continue as a solo artist. Afterwards, Coverdale resumed his writing sessions with Vandenberg on what would be a solo album. They began recording in 1995 in Reno, Nevada, where Coverdale was living at the time. He produced the album himself with Bjorn Thorogood acting as engineer. The album was then mixed by Mike Shipley and mastered by Eddie Schreier. In the studio, Coverdale and Vandenberg were joined by bassist Guy Pratt, keyboardist Brett Tuggle, and drummer Danny Carmassi, all of whom had performed on the Coverdale Page tour. Carmassi had also been a member of Whitesnake on the Greatest Hits tour. Restless Heart was much more laid back than the previous two Whitesnake albums. It was also more blues influenced. A number of Coverdale's unused ideas for a second Coverdale Page album were used for Restless Heart, namely on the songs Woman, Trouble Blues, and Take Me Back Again. Then there was Too Many Tears, which was originally conceived in the early 1990s during Coverdale and Vandenberg's initial writing sessions. The original version was described by Coverdale as old stack soul tune, but the song was later reworked into a blues number. Lyrically, the album's title track explores Coverdale's mindset during the slip of the tongue and its accompanying tour, when he became worn out trying to fulfill everyone else's expectations. You could also hear the influence that the Jimmy Page project had on him on the song Crying, which has been compared to Led Zeppelin from several music critics. As the record was being finished, new higher-ups at EMI flew to Reno for a listening session. Afterwards, they informed Coverdale that they wanted the album to be released under the Whitesnake name. That's a story we've heard many times before, of course. At first, Coverdale objected, feeling that the record was stylistically too different from the band. However, Coverdale's contract with EMI refers to him as David Coverdale, known as the artist Whitesnake. Therefore, he was contractually obligated to comply. It was at Danny Carmassi's suggestion that he decided to compromise and agreed to release the album under the name David Coverdale and Whitesnake. As a result, the guitars and drums on the album were brought up in the mix in order to bring the album closer to Whitesnake's sound. Coverdale really wasn't happy with the decision. Restless Heart was released on March 26, 1997 in Japan and May 26 in Europe. Two promo albums containing tracks from Restless Heart were released under the name Precious Secrets and No Shadows on the Wall. It peaked at number 34 on the UK albums chart and spent a total of 3 weeks on the chart. This ended the group's top 10 consecutive streak in the UK after a string of 6 studio albums. It found better success on the Rock and Metal Albums chart, where it spent 17 weeks. Restless Heart did not receive a North American release, being available only as an import. By the end of 1997, it had sold 103,340 copies in Japan. Too Many Tears and Don't Fade Away were released as singles from the album, with the former peaking at number 46 on the UK singles chart. On the Rock and Metal singles chart, it reached number 5 and charted for 34 weeks. Music videos were produced for both tracks, directed by Russell Young. The video for Too Many Tears also featured future Whitesnake member Marco Mendoza on bass. The supporting tour for Restless Heart was billed as Whitesnake's farewell tour, as Coverdale wanted to explore other forms of music outside of hard rock. He would go on to release a solo album, Into the Light, in 2000. I'll talk about that in a future video. For the tour, Pratt and Tuggle were replaced by Tony Franklin and Derek Hilland, while Steve Farris was recruited as a second guitarist. During a promotional trip to Japan in 1997, Coverdale and Vandenberg were asked by Toshiba EMI to perform an acoustic set of songs. This performance was later released as Starkers in Tokyo, and the Last Hurrah tour began in September 1997 and ended that December in South America. Whitesnake's 1997 album Restless Heart received a mixed and heavily divided response from both fans and music critics upon its release. Given that it was a solo album with the Whitesnake name forced upon it, the album failed to replicate the commercial heights of the band's previous multi-platinum records, only peaking at number 34 on the UK albums chart and completely lacking a North American release. Music critics were largely torn over the album's departure from the band's signature style. The album received a mixed response from music critics and only reached 34 in the group's native UK. Reviewers noted that Restless Heart featured a significantly more subdued mid-tempo and soul-drenched pop rock style. It was a stark contrast from the explosive high-energy glam metal of 87's self-titled album and 89's Slip of the Tongue. Critics regularly praised David Coverdale's voice, noting that even though the music lacked the raw power of earlier eras, the bluesy and soulful atmospheres highlighted his vocal maturity. Some reviewers felt the track list suffered from lack of variation, calling the slower soul tracks boring or mid, while still appreciating the technical guitar performance of Adrian Vandenberg. Fan reaction was dictated entirely by geographical availability and stylistic preferences. Because Whitesnake was dropped by Geffen Records in 1994, American fans were mostly left in the dark. The album was not distributed in North America and could only be bought as an expensive import, causing many fans to discover it years or decades later. Hardcore fans of Whitesnake's heavier stadium rock era were often alienated or angered by the commercial, softer pop soul choruses. Conversely, fans who preferred early 1980s Whitesnake appreciated the return to Coverdale's deep blues rock roots, finding songs like Too Many Tears and Woman Trouble Blues to be highly memorable highlights. The record experienced a significant critical appraisal following its 25th anniversary Super Deluxe reissue in 2021 through Rhino Entertainment. The mono remix by Christopher Collier added heavier guitar layers from Joel Hoekstra and keyboards from Derek Sherinian. Fans and critics widely agreed that this reissue successfully put the Whitesnake stamp on the album, providing the sonic redemption it lacked in 1997. Following the 1997 release and subsequent farewell tour for Restless Heart, David Coverdale temporarily disbanded Whitesnake and pivoted back to a solo career, leading to his third solo record, Into the Light, in September 2000. That will be a future video. But before that, the next video I'm going to make is about Deep Purple's Abandon. That's the next episode, the second Deep Purple album with Steve Morse, and pretty good album. I think it doesn't get talked about a lot. So that will be next. Check out the playlist, should be on your screen. This is the Deep Purple family tree, or the entire story of Deep Purple. I have over 50 videos at this point, so there's a lot to watch. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.